Let's get started. Hi everyone, and welcome to the Modern Malware and Ransomware Talk. I'm here with Fritz Winter, who is the CEO of Computed Future and also one of the inventors of some really cool technology that maybe you will hear about later. But for now, we're here to talk about malware and ransomware. Who am I? I'm Harlan Beverly. I'm an advisor to Computed Future. I'm also a security and network engineer. And honestly, I'm more into sales these days. So I'm the kind of annoying sales guy, whereas Fritz is the much better technologist. So I'm going to let Fritz take over. So Fritz, tell us, what is malware and ransomware?
Okay. Yeah. So malware is software. So it is something that will run on somebody's computer system, but with a specific objective to disrupt or damage or gain unauthorized access on somebody's system. There are different types of malware, including ransomware, virus, worms, trojans, and many more categories. The one category that we're talking about here today is called ransomware. So what ransomware does, when it gets installed, it normally encrypts a part of a user's hard drive and then extorts the user to pay the attacker to get the data back. Yeah, so
I'm right. That can sometimes they can ask for millions of dollars, and sometimes companies even pay it. We're going to have some examples later, but
yes.
It's definitely a very bad thing. I mean, all malware is bad. Ransomware is one of the worst kinds, maybe because of that that pain point of give us cash or else. So yeah, it's pretty scary stuff.
Yes, yeah, it is. It's pretty scary.
Okay, so there's some statistics that that I know that we've gathered together over time from the last couple of years, 2021, 2020, and some of these statistics are pretty alarming. I mean, the idea that nearly 75% of every organization got infected by some type of malware in 2021, and 61% got some ransomware issue. Like, that's a pretty high number. So I guess in some cases, these malwares and ransomwares can be cleaned off, but not in all cases. Isn't that right?
That's correct. If you have the correct procedures in place, like backups and so forth, you can recover from it. But I know of companies that the malware attack even encrypted their backups, and they were absolutely forced to pay the money.
Oh, so brutal. And this is another alarming statistic, and I don't think it's been updated for 2021 yet, but there were 5.6 billion attacks. And when they say attacks, do you think that they're mostly talking about network attacks, or are they talking about people walking in with thumb drives? It's mostly network attacks, right?
Correct. Yes.
I mean, obviously, malware can get in the system in a lot of different ways. It could be walked in with a thumb drive. It could be somebody, opens an email or something like that. But this is mainly talking about those attacks where a firewall or something blocked the attempt.
Yes. Yeah. Correct.
That's insane. That's a big number, and it doesn't even account for what I think is one of the scarier things is, oh, you accidentally open an email, you accidentally install something from a thumb drive, or those ones are even harder to detect because like you don't even know about them until too late sometimes.
Correct. Yep. And that's a vector that's used quite a lot these days, using so-called phishing campaigns or spear phishing where they target specific users. And most users are pretty savvy, but some inadvertently still click on the wrong link, and the bad software is installed, and the process starts to install the malware itself.
If these things weren't alarming enough, what the other trend that's happening is we're understaffed. I mean, the cybersecurity departments in over 60% of organizations feel that they're quite understaffed, and I know that that's a trend, and it's not getting better, especially as IT costs are going up and the costs for qualified engineers go up. The human beings are expensive already, and when you're understaffed and the prices are going up, I mean, it's hard to get people to do this kind of work, isn't it?
That's correct. And when they are understaffed and overworked, they often overlook signs that they should see and react on.
but that's not stopping the attackers, right? So they're still making more types of variants of malware. I mean, sometimes they have like a common root, but there'll be small variations, and sometimes you'll get a whole new root of malware or ransomware, and next thing you know, like it's not something you really expected. But they have a common root, and that common root can sometimes be detected, which is a good thing. And then even in just by looking at certain activities that they shouldn't be doing, a really good system, an AI system, which we might get into in a bit, might be able to detect something malicious is going on.
Correct. That's right. If you can detect common sequences of events that malware in general need to go through, even though it's a new variant of malware, a good system should be able to detect that also.
And we're going to talk about such a good system soon. But let's keep going on talking about malware and ransomware. So this is the slide that gets me the most excited, and because it talks about the effects on an organization. You know, I've been a CEO myself, and I've run large companies, and I can tell you that the impacts of malware, and especially ransomware, but really any kind of malware, can be enormous. I mean, we're talking about, obviously, if you pay the ransomware payment, which could be millions, that's one direct kind of impact. There's also cleanup time and money on the cleanup, the database recovery. There could be penalties and fines depending on if you leaked sensitive data or something, or if someone stole some data, which is certainly possible, or someone could even steal money or steal things that are worth money, and you have to. Those are all direct effects of dealing with this, and as well as legal fees that might come up. And then indirect effects, there's this lost productivity. I mean, this could be huge, especially if you're like a manufacturing, or God forbid, you're a utilities and people are without power. Like, this is serious stuff, this lost output and productivity, and potentially lost lives if this is critical infrastructure. So there's these indirect effects and costs that are potentially even bigger than the direct effects. And that's part of why sometimes people pay the ransomware, is because they like, look, it's better to pay the ransomware than it is to have this lost output productivity. But here's one problem, and that is that there's a statistic, and I think it's in the presentation later. Only about 33% of people who pay the ransomware actually get anything out of it. Sometimes you pay and it doesn't actually work. They don't decrypt it, and you're actually just stuck. And that's a big issue. So you're really gambling if you decide to pay that ransomware. The only thing I was going to say is that there's also this lasting impact. So if you're an organization and you had some ransomware, you had some malware, and it caused some problem that other people saw, and you had to report that, or you had to report this, that lasting impact on your brand can really stick around for a long time, and our customer is going to trust you in the future with their data. And if you're reliant on that data, it could really destroy your whole company, because now they don't trust you. So that's a lasting impact, and decreased customer trust, loyalty, negative brand impact, obviously your stock price, and even employee frustration. And I invented a new term for this one, Fritz, because that's what us sales guys like to do. I call it cyber burden. Cyber burden is the fact that now, because of this attack that happened last year, I have to do these 10 security things, the security trainings, and watch these videos, and like the whole organization has to watch them. Look, I'm not saying those videos aren't important and worthwhile, but good golly, it can feel very burdensome if they ramp up the frequency, if they really push it too hard, and now you have to do so much of this cyber burden, I'll call it. So that's definitely something worth being stressed about.
That's a cool term.
Okay, so here's a couple of examples of some high-profile cases. And by the way, there's a ton more. You can just Google malware or ransomware attacks. But I thought these two were interesting because one of them has had a lasting impact. I mean, City of Baltimore, they have this bad reputation from this really awful ransomware attack that hit them. They decided not to pay, and it took them over a month to recover normal operations within the city. And they're still recovering from the data loss, which is unbelievably sad and frustrating. I mean, they're never going to recover some of that data. So they've estimated it's at least $18 million that they've spent on the recovery. And that doesn't account for all the outages and issues that the city had while this was going on. So definitely a high profile case, and I say many, I mean thousands of cases that have been reported. Hydro is another company. It's out of Norway, and they had a similar problem. Except this one is different because it's actually a manufacturing company, and they had a problem with this. They just also decided not to pay, which, by the way, if you decide to pay, it's a gamble anyway. So deciding not to pay is usually the right decision if you can possibly recover. But this company, Hydro, has spent over $60 million trying to recover. And that doesn't even include the fact that they had to turn off their production lines while they were trying to get this, while they were sorting this stuff out. And that is like, so that's what I was talking about, those lasting effects of those like indirect effects, right? The direct effect is they had to spend a lot of money trying to recover. And the indirect effects is that their line was down for this whole entire time. Over 30 days of line down. I mean, imagine if you're a manufacturing company and 1/12 of your annual output is just gone. I mean, you could go from a black year to a red year really quickly. Are there any other cases that you stick out in your mind, Fritz?
Oh yeah, one of the slightly recent cases is the one of the power organization in Florida that was hit by also by a ransomware attack.
And it was a power company, right?
Yeah, it was a power company. The FBI had to step in and help them, and yet they still suffered a lot of damage.
Yeah, Florida Power and Light, I think it was. I'm looking at it right now, and yeah, that's particularly scary if you rely on that power for your home. I mean, especially Florida, it's kind of convenient because at least you're not going to die. But up north, if your power company gets hit, people could die. That's super intense, scary stuff.
Yeah, correct.
Well, let's talk about how these malware intrusions are happening. So Fritz, you want to explain this?
Yes. Yeah, so what I'm showing here is the so-called attack kill chain. To any security professional out there, this should not be news, but what it shows is the different phases or steps that are taken by attackers to finally get their objectives, to accomplish their objectives. So initially they would do reconnaissance. So that would be harvesting email addresses of LinkedIn of employees, or running scans on IP addresses to figure out what the network of the customer looks like. Then there would be a weaponization phase to figure out what exploits they can try and attack after their reconnaissance. And then they would do the delivery. So the weaponized bundle that they set up would then be delivered either via an email or a USB or a exploit that they have found on one of the systems.
Can I interrupt you there? So
Yes.
So what you're talking about delivery, I feel like that's such an important piece to understand because first of all, the reconnaissance, it's interesting because that's something that you could potentially detect right early on before anything bad has happened. You could just detect that they're looking at you, that the bad guys are checking you out.
Yes, and that is definitely traceable. Every one of these phases is traceable.
I know the delivery. I know we talked a little bit about someone walking in with the USB key, but that's really not the way things are done. Mostly now it's like you said, the phishing and spear phishing and email and of course exploits. So talk about exploits again. So exploits is when they discover that, for example, you've got a certain Linux version, right? Or you're running a certain Windows version and it hasn't been patched. And they know how to run arbitrary code on your server that's kind of like a preloader that then loads the actual ransomware malware. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, so during the reconnaissance, you could also find out what systems are running and what versions of the systems, and then you would know what kind of vulnerabilities are on those systems. And then you would be able to use an exploit to get your malware into the organization.
Right. So that's the exploitation phase, I guess, or is that?
Yes, that's right. And then the installation phase is where using the tools that got through the previous phases would get installed. And then there would be a so-called command and control phase where the attacker can remotely control the installed malware and do what the attacker wants. and achieve the attacker's goal. And then finally, the actions that that the attacker wanted to achieve. Would it be stealing data, or would it be encrypting data and extorting the customer, in that case malware, and various whatever nefarious objectives they wanted to achieve.
So I know that later we're going to talk a little bit about ways to mitigate some of these risks and problems, and but I know that we've kind of been gloom and doom on some of this malware and ransomware stuff, but just to kind of keep things positive, I mean, we do have some things already that can help us, some tools already that can help us. One of them is a basic firewall. Like if you have a basic firewall, that's going to protect you a little bit, hopefully, because then they're only limited to those ports and services which you've exposed in your firewall. Unfortunately, most of those ports also have exploit capabilities. And someone told me once, Fritz, and maybe you can confirm this claim, but all it takes is one line of JavaScript to be run arbitrarily, and someone can take over your entire system. Is that right?
That's correct.
That is intense.
Yes.
That can really that's really interesting and scary. So, okay. Well, let's keep going. So the other thing that we want to think about here is all these different methods. So we talked a little bit about the USB, but what else can you tell us about methods?
Yes. So there would be different methods and procedures and approaches that attackers would follow to essentially get access to your assets. So we talked about phishing and spear phishing, but I mean, there are various ways that they can do this. Another example is supply chain attacks. One of the most prominent examples that we know of is the SolarWinds package that's being used by a large number of organizations to do network and systems monitoring. And the attackers were able to install a small virtual machine inside of the installation packages of SolarWinds. And thereby, every time that somebody upgraded their SolarWinds that has access to everything in the infrastructure, the attacker's virtual machine was executed. And
I want to interrupt on that one because, man, in a way, that's almost like a USB if you think about it, because you're just a regular sysadmin and you're just doing a normal upgrade to your SolarWinds. And as part of that normal upgrade, which you trust and come from a vendor that you in theory trust, comes a malware. And that's nearly undetectable at that phase because you just trust them and you're installing because I'm sure you've gotten it from their site, and the upgrades happen automatically and naturally. And to me, that is like one of the scariest things that you can possibly have, is the situation where you don't know that you were infected. It doesn't make sense. There was no USB port on the server, but you still got it installed and infected. And so one of the things I know we're going to talk about in a minute is how do you know that you're infected, and how can you prevent the spread? Because I see on here you've also got lateral movement, right? So lateral movement is when something, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, Fritz, but lateral movement is when one system has been infected and then it infects another system that it has access to, and then it keeps spreading. Is that right?
That's correct, yes. So maybe an initial phase of an attack was just to get access to one part of the organization, and what they would do is do further internal reconnaissance to find out what other systems are around them. And often because their software has been installed on a system that's got more privileges, they now have more power to distribute themselves. Some of these tools are automated, some of it's done mainly through remote control.
And that's how they might wiggle their way from, let's say, like a web server down into the database server.
Yes, yeah, that's true.
And that's super scary right there, because if they get to your database server, they can maybe even get to your backups, which is what we were talking about earlier.
Correct.
And it would be great if you could have stopped it at the web server, because usually web server, you can just turn that off. And or replace it with a fresh one, like if you can detect it soon enough before it's had time for that lateral movement. And that's really a major issue. So yeah, that's very interesting. I didn't want to interrupt you too far. So did you have anything else to say about this this method of getting in?
Oh no, I mean, I think we get the idea that any port of entry, if I want to use the analogy, onto any of your servers or your systems is possibly a way that malware can get in.
Yeah.
And that's what the inner circle represents there.
So there are some problems then. I mean, with cybersecurity is a general rule. And the biggest problem, and I like the tagline at the top, it only takes one breach. I mean, at the end of the day, if anybody gets in, it's that one person that gets in can wreak havoc. And that means that you have to be able to detect it. And protection is never 100%. There's always something called 0-day. And maybe Fritz, you could talk about what 0-day means. I mean, 0-day is like this big term, right? It's the scariest term in cyber, is it not?
Correct. Yes, that would mean a brand new vulnerability that is being detected, and or a brand new attack approach that has been figured out, and all your current security tools don't know how to protect for it, do not know how to handle that. So 0 days are the most troublesome kinds of attacks.
If I go back, based on that definition, if I'm right, that means that in 2020 there were 268,000 0 days just for malware.
Correct.
That is an intensely interesting number, because this is the one that we can't account for. If it's malware we already know about, that's hopefully we can detect it and do something about it. But what about the ones that are 0 day? What about the ones that we didn't have our system weren't able to detect because they were 0 day? Those are the ones that I think are super scary. And also, and this is another statistic, you can take up to 200 days just to notice that you've been breached at all. And during that entire time, you don't even know that you've been breached. And so that whole time you could have been leaking data, leaking customer data, losing money. Somebody could be skimming money off the top of every account, so to keep it secret, they'll just skim, $1 after every transaction, and you may never know that. Or at least not know it for hundreds of days, and that could lead to millions or hundreds of millions of dollars if they do it just right. So we need this prediction thing, this inability to predict. It's this breaches, exploits, and malware. They're usually detected after they occur. We talked about 0 day threats are continuous, but the tools don't react in time, and that was kind of the inspiration for what you did, right, Fritz, for Computed Future product.
That's correct. Yes. So the issue is that we are always reactive. So we have tools that can detect something as it happens, but not before it happens.
Yes.
So the idea is, can we get a few steps ahead to understand that something might be happening? Is there a risk of an attack actually happening at this point in time, even though it may not be happening? But is there a way to figure out if there's a heightened risk so we can be more proactive?
That's right. So just to kind of put that into perspective, if the enterprise are the good guys and the attacker are the bad guys, right? The enterprise, they're like to do things like they've always done them. Maybe they've got this sense of security, but it might be false because 0 days are always happening, right? And they're mostly always reacting, which is your point, is we're being reactionary. But the attacker is not that way. They're actually proactive, right? They're kind of always innovating. They're always adapting and changing, trying to find new ways and understanding new vulnerabilities and doing their research to try to get in. So these things are not in balance, and that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to do at Computed Future. That's what the technology that you and your team have invented. And I'm going to use my really, really basic understanding of everything to try to explain it. And then Fritz, you're going to correct me when I do it completely wrong. So here's the idea. You've got hackers that are doing their thing. Maybe they've got a 0 day, or maybe they've just got some good exploits that you haven't patched for yet, or whatever. And they're trying to break in, right? So they're trying to break in to your servers over here, right? They want to get to your data, your servers, or even your desktops. If they can lock out a desktop of an executive, that's something that could be a big deal too, because maybe that executive has all your customers list on it, or maybe that executive needs that data to, for whatever reason. So this is the attempted attack. What you're doing at Computed Future is you've built AI that's going to monitor every packet, every piece of data that comes from anybody, even who might be hackers. I'd say hackers and non-hackers. You don't know, but you're gonna monitor every single one, and you're gonna use AI, and you're gonna as AI as well as some patterns that you've established. We'll talk about the patterns in the next slide, but you're gonna use some AI techniques, and you're gonna predict that maybe something bad is happening, and you're gonna alert the team over here. You're gonna give them, hey, team, just so you know, there's a problem. There's maybe someone is attacking. That's coming in, and I think that's great, and that helps with 0-day. But what if someone's already got something installed? And this is where what I think Computed Future really has something special. What if you installed that patch from someone you trust, or someone brought in a USB key and stuck it in? Well, those two things would probably not have been detected here, right? Someone brought a USB key and stuck it in, or if that was part of a normal patch, you probably wouldn't have detected that here. Nobody would have. Nobody did. With SolarWinds. But you, Computed Future, you would detect it because bad things would be happening over here, and those guys would be sending data out. So you're also tracking and data that's coming out of the data center or the computer or the desktop.
Between servers.
And even between, I didn't even think about that. That's a really interesting. So that would also potentially detect that motion, that what we call it, the
lateral movement.
Lateral movement. Thank you. That would also detect that lateral movement. So you're detecting all this stuff, and to me, that's where the AI gets particularly interesting, because now it's not going to take you 200 days to detect that something bad is happening. You're going to detect it potentially in hours or even seconds. And when that happens, you can then shut down the bad server if you want to, or you can, immediately have a rapid response team go in and see, okay, what's going on? Why is this alarming? And maybe prevent it from locking up that entire database, or even that entire hard drive. It can take hours to encrypt a hard drive. So if you interrupt it, you can prevent that from happening. And I think that's what makes Computed Future's solution so powerful, is that you're not just taking in, you're also checking out, and you're using AI to predict those 0-day threats, which is really the scary ones. And that's so. Do I have the basic concept right?
Yeah. So essentially, what we do is we try and look at attacks from a holistic point of view, not just at every specific step that current products are really focused on. We look at, is it possible that a longer term workflow is actually underway? And that's also very good, for instance, for APTs, advanced persistent threats. So even though somebody lurks around for many, many days, and that's when it's really a large, sophisticated, maybe nation state that's attacking, they will often get in and lay low for a while and then do something else. We would not give up. Our system will have sessions that can run months and months and months, and slowly we will increase the progress along those sessions, and finally they will show up, and you can respond to it.
Yeah, and I think that also comes to that that we talked about a minute ago, but there was this idea of this phase where they're doing the reconnaissance. So this is that whole chain. So your point about an APT is this whole sequence might be months, and you can detect them as early as here, and you can tell them, for example, what percent they are, how many ports they've scanned, and what process they are, or how much farther along they are in this. And that's a really powerful thing, because that's awesome. So all right, so let's get into a little bit more nuts and bolts here about your solution, because one of the things that I think is amazing is this is live. This is available right now. I mean, if you are a company and you want to be more protected against ransomware and malware, you can get that from Computed Future. All you have to do is at the end of this presentation, we've got a little link that you can go and sign up to be a pilot customer. And I believe there's some special discount as well, since you've been part of this awesome webinar. So, but like how it works is there's like an agent that installed, right? So we get into how it works. There's an agent that gets installed on the system that you want to protect, the system or container, if I understand right, Fritz?
Correct. Yeah. So essentially, on any system that our sensor can see your network interfaces.
Right. So it's monitoring network interfaces, all the network interfaces in the container or in the server,
Yes.
or potentially both.
Both,
Sometimes, and it's monitoring all that stuff, and that's where it monitors all the ins and outs, and it's doing that at the OS level, right? It's not doing it at the application level. It's down at the OS level, whether it be Windows or Linux,
yes.
I guess Mac, or even cloud. You have some special partnerships with cloud partners, so you can do it at the cloud level as well. So you're monitoring all the network traffic, and you're sending that traffic in a very secure way to the analyzer. The analyzer is the computed future magic beans, right? This is where this analyzer, this whole thing here, is the magic. That's the AI system that's doing the analysis. So is that right?
That's correct. The first phase is really understanding small patterns that represent events along a workflow. So that's the packet analyzer. We also have a metadata server so that we can track where this came from, so you know where to triage you if something goes wrong. And then we also have the next phase, which is a more intelligent part of the system. That we call them the inference servers. And the inference servers would do the calculations and use its clever smarts to figure out if progress has happened on any of the attacks. And any of those progress events would be sent via a message bus to the data servers, and that is then stored in the database. And then finally, it is available on a dashboard, or you could integrate into the platform and see those events in your own SIM or in your own security stack.
I think we're going to look at that dashboard in just a minute, but just to kind of go back a step. So this point before the dashboard, there's also this ability to get these alerts and alarms, and it can be done in a number of ways, including like a syslog, and that's the idea, right? Is you can get those alarms, and if you're an IT or in your security group, you're gonna get that alarm and be able to react to it, and decide, okay, I need to do something about this. I need to add a rule to my firewall, or I need to potentially shut down that server. I mean, I can react in a smart way.
Correct. Yeah. So we directly integrate into your response workflow.
Fantastic. Okay, so I mean that's as deep as I'll get in terms of this stuff. But I think there's one other thing that is worth talking about, and that is you guys have a relationship, and you get data from third parties about network traffic. And I think I've heard you call it as a PCAP. Is that right? Something called a PCAP, a packet capture?
Yes. What we do is we have a very keen set of skills for offensive research, and what we do is we harvest all the possible attacks that have happened and various ways that attacks do happen in the form of packet captures. Either by actually doing the attacks or by harvesting them from third-party sources. And then that's our source of training data, if you want to call that. So, and that is an ongoing process. Every single day we get more and more of this into our models, and that's all available to our customers and deployed to them on a continuous basis.
Very cool. So in case those 0 days happen, number one, if it looks similar to some prior 0 day, you'll catch it right away. And number two, you might catch it day one once you get that packet capture of some other 0 day. And there's two ways in which you're protecting them, potentially from the AI just by noticing the pattern, and then secondly, because those PCAPs are constantly updated, just like an antivirus update is getting. These are also getting updated constantly. So that's really cool. All right, so I think we've talked a lot about this already, but I want to just highlight a couple of things. I mean, this is patent pending technology. It's really cutting edge. It's artificial intelligence based, and that's where this is unique. And one of the things that I wanted to explain is that it integrates into your current security vendor. This is a new thing that is something that every company should be doing. And the reason is, yeah, maybe you've already got, let's say, antivirus. Maybe you've already got some firewalls, right? Maybe you've already got some companies have something called deep security and network alarms and other things, and you've already got some of this stuff, and all those things are fine, and they all work seamlessly and integrate just fine with Computed Future, because Computed Future does another level. It's the only one that's going to be monitoring your network in and out, and also creating those alarms and alerts for you proactively and protecting you against 0-day. Most of these other guys aren't able to protect you against 0-day, and I think that's like one of the main things.
Yep. We don't want to replace everything you've already installed. We are really a way to do an overarching analysis of attacks as they happen along the attack kill chain. So it's kind of helping you in a way that we are supplying you a security expert in the box that is automated, that understands something for a longer term attack is actually happening, but it's automated.
And that gets right to our threat dashboard. And I think we have plenty of time. I'd love to spend just 2 minutes, Fritz, if you want to pull that up. I'll stop sharing so that you can share that. I'd love people to see this dashboard. One of the things that's special about the dashboard, just because I'll talk about it while you're pulling it up, is the idea that, you know, the visibility of what's happening is so important. Like, you don't want some ugly thing or some only see alerts. You want to see what's happening. You want to see trends. You want to see how much attacks are happening, how much attacks are succeeding, or what percentage they are. And that's what you've got here. And it really can help you get that better visibility to your whole organization, because maybe you're the head of IT, or maybe you're head of information security, or maybe this. And at the end of the day, you need your executive team to understand that these attacks are real, but that you've got it covered. And this can help them do that as well. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the dashboard here?
Okay. So what you're seeing over here is a dashboard into everything that we've seen happening inside of an organization so far. And we highlight the attacks that have progressed far. And that is our measurement of risk as well. So the progress value between 0 and 1 gives us kind of a view of the risk. So you don't have to worry about anything that's really low. It might be just benign, but anything that goes beyond a threshold, you can then put your attention into. So this dashboard shows, and let me give you some background about the data up here. This is a fictitious data set. So we have set up a system and we have attacked it, and just so that we can see what happens and what kind of data we see. We have a resource in organization. We call it demo resource, and there are specific attacks that we ran, and so that I can show you that. So on the dashboard here, we have kind of 3 blocks at the top. So we see 2 complete attacks have completed. I really hope you never see that in your organization. And then you would also see if there were any other low threat level, risk levels of threats. So one other thing I need to clarify here is our terminology. An attack is a sequence of steps of a workflow of an attack that has completed to 100%. That's an attack. Anything below 100%, we call a threat. So that's why that's how we distinguish between the two. So if I want to scroll up here, we have a little bit of slice and dice data analysis of the threats that we've seen so far. And we have 2 different models. We also have different models of, so here we have the container escape model, and then this the HTTP attacks, so things that attack web servers and those things. So we categorize our attacks also in different categories. So let me go into this block over here, and I'm seeing 2 attacks that have completed, unfortunately. And this gives us the opportunity then to select one and immediately see when was the last progress on it, and any hosts that were involved. In this case, it was a demo host that we installed on, and any other metadata, and that's configurable when we install it in our system. So we could add, it was in that data center in that region, or in that location, or whatever it is. And we can provide the exact information you need for triage. At this point, we didn't integrate with a different system, but here you can integrate into your incident management system and immediately send a ticket into that system, and people will start working on that. When you're done, you can also select this and say clear, and it will disappear from the list, and then you've done the work on it. Just to show you some of the other ones that are also happening right now. So we have 2 of them at 100%. And here we see a whole bunch of other ones that, because of the traffic that happened when we did the attack, also showed some progress. Although we try to focus on these, there's some commonalities between different attacks that you will see. And that's how they all kind of progress at the same time, very efficiently. So if I go back to this one, let me go and show you the history of this attack. So we show you a timeline starting from the very first step, way back, right up to the final step that completed the attack to 100% over here. So it's very detailed view of all the steps that it took for the attack to get here. We can also show it to you as a graph. We actually show you a section of the AI graph tool, that graphing back end of the system, and we can replay the attack from start to end. So your analyzers, your security analysis team can look at every single step as I go next, right up to the end, to see how we progress through this graph data structure that we're using for our AI. And there's another example of a very explainable type of AI versus deep learning that is black box. It just spews out the number and you have to believe it. So that is kind of very deep understanding of every single step that it took for us to get you to 100% of the attack. So we also have other kind of screens over here. For instance, we could go to origins. So that's one server where the attack has been completed. And I can also look at threats over there. So I can sort it according to progress and so on. So let's look at another one. This one is, there's not much that has happened on this one. It's only 3 steps that has happened. You'll see that. And then I can show you models as well. So like the categories of attacks. So we have under attacks over here, we have threats on this one for the web model. So we can slice and dice the data for you in different dimensions. The most important one here is really the dashboard and the response. So that's where we want to focus and look at what is very high, where I need to immediately trigger triage. We also have the ability for you to create users so that they can access the system. You can add users and so forth, create passwords for them and so on.
Have servers or you have very sensitive machines, sensitive computers like executive machines or whatever. We want to help you protect those machines. That's what Computer Future does. And all you have to do is go to that form and fill it out. Anything else that you'd like to share, Fritz, with everyone?
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity to share our platform with you. And we'd be happy to get you going. And I'm looking forward to any questions you might have and to getting you on board on our pilot program.
Yeah, we're happy to take questions now. So